The Romans built harbors that grow stronger with the crashing of every wave, while our modern concrete crumbles in mere decades. We didn't actually surpass them. We simply forgot their secrets. For centuries, we have looked back at the ruins of the ancient world with a mixture of pity and wonder, assuming our steel and glass skyscrapers represent the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. We tell ourselves that time is a linear path of progress, right? Yet we stand in the shadow of the Great Pyramid and realize an uncomfortable truth. Our ancestors weren't just building monuments, they were mastering the very elements. While our highways fracture and our bridges corrode, the limestone of Egypt and the volcanic ash of Rome whisper a different story. These aren't just cold, dead stones. They are active, living technologies forged with a chemical sophistication that modern science is only now, finally, beginning to decode. We are standing on the precipice of a lost era, looking through the dust of millennia to rediscover the engineering hacks we once threw away. Secrets that don't just endure the world, but thrive within it. As the sun rises over the Giza Plateau, casting long, golden shadows across stones that have seen empires rise and fall, we must ask ourselves, what did they know that we have forgotten? Today, we peel back the layers of history to reveal a forgotten mastery of the earth, where stone was not just a material, but a legacy designed to last forever. For too long, we have been comforted by a simple, digestible lie. We are told that the wonders of the ancient world were bought with a currency of endless suffering, the product of 1,000 lashes and 1,000,000 broken backs. We picture a sea of humanity dragging massive stones through the dust, fueled only by the primitive grit of brute force. But when you move past the textbook illustrations and look at the raw data, the math simply does not add up. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. Between blocks weighing as much as a modern tank, the joinery is so precise that you cannot slide a single razor blade, nor even a strand of hair between them. This is not the result of exhausted laborers pulling ropes. This is the work of master craftsmen practicing a level of optical precision that should have been impossible for their era. They weren't just moving rocks. They were manipulating the very fabric of the earth with a surgical touch. Travel across the sea to the Acropolis of Athens, where the Parthenon stands as a ghost of a golden age. It has survived empires, sieges, and the violent tremors of the earth. Every column, every beam, and every step is imbued with subtle, intentional curves, mathematical adjustments designed to harmonize with the human eye. It is a structure that breathes with its environment. Yet in our modern era of supercomputers and high-tensile steel, our billion-dollar bridges and highways begin to fracture and fail after barely half a century. We build for the next fiscal quarter. They build for the next 10,000 years. We have been conditioned to view history as a straight line of progress, a slow climb from the primitive to the advanced. But the ruins suggest a far more unsettling reality. What if the so-called Dark Ages were not merely a loss of written records or a lapse in art? What if we suffered a catastrophic amnesia of a physical science we are only now starting to rediscover?
The traditional narrative tells us they were limited by what they didn't have, right? But as we look closer at the impossible symmetry of their work, we have to wonder if they possessed something we've completely overlooked. Because as it turns out, the true secret wasn't in how many men they had, but in a hidden understanding of the very stones they were touching. And what they were doing with those stones suggests they weren't just building monuments, they were building machines. To understand how these ancient masterminds achieved the impossible, we must first discard the modern conceit. The idea that our era holds a monopoly on genius. Step into the mind of a builder in the shadow of the Parthenon, or beneath the sweltering, unforgiving sun of the Giza Plateau. These were not mere laborers stacking blocks. No, they were the first true chemists and physicists of our story, driven by an absolute obsession with physis, the inherent nature of matter. They didn't view the environment as an adversary to be conquered with brute force. Instead, they invited it into their blueprints, treating stone and mortar as living, reactive participants. Look at the Roman ports, still defying the corrosive hunger of the Mediterranean Sea after 2,000 years. While our modern concrete crumbles in mere decades, the Roman secret lay in the volcanic earth of the Pozzuoli region. By mixing this distinct volcanic ash with lime and seawater, they triggered a chemical reaction that grew stronger over time. The sea didn't destroy their work, it nurtured it, growing new interlocking mineral structures within the concrete itself. It was a partnership with geology that we have only recently begun to replicate. And then there are the Egyptians. Beyond the sheer scale of the limestone blocks, there lies a molecular mystery. The stone of the Great Pyramid is not simply quarried rock, it is a composition chosen for its unique mineralogical properties. They understood the resonance of the earth, selecting materials that could withstand immense pressure and temperature shifts. They weren't just selecting rocks for their aesthetic, right? They were choosing them for their atomic endurance. We often marvel at the result, but we rarely interrogate the recipe. These master builders viewed every mountain and every riverbed as a laboratory of raw, untapped potential. But if they possessed such a profound grasp of the material world, why did this mastery vanish from the human record for so long? What was it about their process that made their structures defy the very laws of entropy that govern everything we build today? However, the materials were only the canvas. The true genius wasn't just in the stone, but in the unseen forces they were attempting to harness, forces that might change everything we think we know about their ultimate purpose. The true mastery of these builders lay in a fundamental shift of perspective. They didn't view their constructions as static monoliths to be imposed upon the earth, but as living machines designed to breathe and pulse in harmony with the natural world. Consider the Roman engineers, whose legacy is etched not just in stone, but in chemistry. They developed a concrete infused with volcanic ash that didn't just sit there waiting to crumble. I mean, think about it. When moisture infiltrated their structures, it triggered a chemical reaction, growing new interlocking crystalline structures that effectively sealed the cracks as they formed. They built with the intent of self-preservation, turning their infrastructure into a living, healing organism that defied the relentless march of decay.
This wasn't an isolated stroke of luck. It was a deliberate philosophy of environmental integration. Look to the Nile, where the ingenuity reached levels of near mythic precision. There is compelling evidence suggesting that the great architects of Egypt may have harnessed the seasonal surges of the river itself, utilizing the immense hydraulic pressure of the rising Nile to act as a colossal lift, hoisting monolithic stones that would be impossible to move by human muscle alone. These were not merely monuments to gods or kings, right? They were sophisticated machines designed to interact with the hidden currents of the earth and sky. But here is where the mystery deepens into something truly profound. If these builders possessed the technology to create self-repairing materials and master the forces of hydraulics, why did this mastery simply evaporate? We are left with a landscape littered with their giants, yet the blueprints, the precise formulas, and the understanding of these forces seem to have been scrubbed from the timeline of human progress. How could a civilization reach such a peak of technological synergy with nature, only to leave us guessing about the very engines that drove their greatness? What we have discovered is merely the skeleton of their world, but the heartbeat of their engineering remains shrouded in a silence that is as unsettling as it is magnificent. And yet, there is one final overlooked mechanism that suggests they knew something about the very fabric of our reality that we have only just begun to suspect. Imagine standing on the jagged coastline of the Mediterranean in 15 BC. The air is thick with the brine of the sea and the scent of pulverized volcanic rock. Here, the Romans were not merely building a pier, they were performing a quiet chemical rebellion against time itself. While modern concrete crumbles under the relentless assault of salt and tides within mere decades, these ancient maritime structures have only grown harder, refusing to succumb to the erosion that levels our own monuments. The secret, you see, lay in their alchemy. By mixing volcanic ash from the slopes of Vesuvius with lime and seawater, they triggered a radical transformation. As the water percolated through the mix, it formed rare mineral crystals known as altormorite. It is a slow, patient process, an engineering hack that unfolds over decades and even centuries. The ocean, rather than destroying the harbor, became the architect of its immortality. They essentially taught stone how to heal its own wounds,
creating a bond so resilient it is as if the harbor were a living, breathing entity, fortifying itself against the very elements that aim to tear it down. This was not a singular stroke of genius, it was part of a broader philosophy of environmental synergy. Across the ancient world, from the burning heat of the Persian deserts to the temperate reaches of the Roman Empire, builders utilized wind catchers, towers engineered to capture the lightest breeze and funnel it through underground channels. Without a single gear or drop of electricity, they achieved a level of climate control that we, in our reliance on humming, energy-hungry machines, are only just beginning to rediscover.
They understood that the Earth was a vast machine, and they were the technicians, not the masters. By working with the flow of the wind and the chemistry of the Earth, they created a legacy of efficiency that dwarfs our modern footprints. But the more we examine these ancient blueprints, the more one question begins to gnaw at the foundation of our history. If they possessed the knowledge to build structures that lasted millennia, why did we decide that the impermanent, the disposable, was the better path forward? And more importantly, what else were they hiding in plain sight, tucked away in the shadows of temples and beneath the silent, shifting sands? The silence that fell upon the Mediterranean after the collapse of the Roman and Egyptian infrastructures, it wasn't merely a political void. It was the onset of a profound technological amnesia. For centuries, the world thrived on sophisticated concrete formulas, hydraulic systems, and logistics networks that defied the very entropy of time. But then, the gears of civilization ground to a halt. It wasn't a singular cataclysm that buried this knowledge, right? It was the brutal fracturing of a globalized supply chain. Consider the Roman marine concrete, a substance that actually grew stronger when battered by the salt and pressure of the ocean. The secret, you see, lay in the precise volcanic ash, the pozzolana, shipped from the Bay of Naples to every corner of the empire. When the trade routes withered, the ash stopped arriving, and the specific volcanic minerals required to replicate that durability became impossible to source. The knowledge wasn't just lost in a library, it was lost because the raw materials required to manifest the science simply disappeared from the map. We transitioned from an era of builders to an era of maintainers, and eventually to an era of consumers. The specialized mastery of these materials was treated as a closely guarded trade secret passed down within tight-knit guilds. When those guilds were shattered by war and economic collapse, the living encyclopedias of stone and mortar died with them. We traded the eternal, the structures intended to stand for 10,000 years, for the convenient, the cheap, and the ultimately disposable. Today, we look at our own infrastructure, roads that crumble within a decade and buildings that are designed to be replaced, and we convince ourselves that this is progress. But perhaps we have simply traded the longevity of our ancestors for the rapid velocity of modern commerce. If we could bridge the gap between their enduring durability and our current manufacturing capacity, just imagine, what could we actually build? And yet, there is a more unsettling question, one that sits right beneath the surface of these ancient ruins. If the collapse of their supply chains could erase their technology in a single generation, how fragile is the foundation of our own? We stand once more before these silent, gargantuan sentinels of stone. The wind whips through the gaps of the Parthenon and dances across the salt-crusted docks of Caesarea. And yet, the true ruins are not found in the weathered limestone or the corroded bronze. The true ruins are our own limited imagination, our tendency to view the past as a primitive prelude rather than a sophisticated mentor.
For decades, we dismissed the Roman method of construction as crude, unaware that beneath the moss and the passage of 2 millennia, their concrete was actually alive. We now know that Roman maritime concrete contains self-healing properties, utilizing volcanic ash and lime clasts that react with seawater to grow stronger over time. While our modern concrete cracks and crumbles within mere decades, theirs defied the relentless assault of the tides. Today, scientists are finally unearthing this ancient alchemy, attempting to replicate this green concrete to build structures that do not merely endure, but actively mend themselves in the face of nature's entropy. We have spent the last century trading the absolute longevity of our ancestors for the frantic, hollow pace of modern commerce. But perhaps, right, the pendulum is swinging back. If we can marry their mastery of material science with our current manufacturing prowess, we could build a world that is not designed to be replaced, but intended to outlast us. Looking back is not an act of nostalgia. It is the only way to move forward with wisdom. The blueprint of the gods was never lost. It was simply hidden in plain sight, etched into the very foundations of the world they built. We are the inheritors of this forgotten ingenuity, and the choice is ours. Do we continue to build for the next fiscal quarter, or do we start building for the next millennium? The secrets of the past are not ghosts to be feared. They are tools waiting to be reclaimed. If you could rebuild one piece of our modern world using the forgotten methods of the ancients, what would you choose? A bridge, a city wall, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this journey through the echoes of history as compelling as we did, consider subscribing to Hidden Epoch Narratives. Look to the stones. They have been trying to tell us the future all along.